We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome 80-20 baseball community. Coach Bo here. Great to be here this week, our weekly get-together. Listener numbers at an all-time high. That's awesome. That means the message is getting out there, the suggestions, the blueprint to better coaching. It's getting out there, the 80-20 way. What's been so great about tracking, and let me say this first, I don't get overly consumed by numbers. At the end of the day, I'm here to connect with all of you. So really what I'm trying to do when I look at the numbers is to understand all of you better and understand what episodes y'all listen to more than others, what topics you're more interested in than others. I look at each episode and the data, and then I look at top episodes to see what all of you are most interested in. In fact, in 3 weeks, I'm going to dive in and discuss topics that relate to, that involve those topics that we discussed on the most listened to episodes. Now, I'm going to go back at least a year, if not more, and drill down and share out some more depth on those topics, on those episodes, and the specific topics within those episodes that you all listen to the most. So next week, we are going to wrap up part 7 of our 7-part series of the highly effective coaching habits. And in 2 weeks, I'm excited. I have an interview lined up, a strength and conditioning coach that coaches a variety of athletes, but has a specific interest in youth baseball. In fact, this coach just yesterday announced that he is going to be going and training under what many consider to be one of the very top baseball strength and conditioning coaches in the country over at TCU. So I am definitely excited to bring this interview and the information that comes from the interview to all of you great listeners, coaches, parents, even players. Like I said, I'll be recording that interview. We'll be doing it this Thursday. I will publish it out there into the ether for all of you in 2 weeks' time. I'm excited to bring this information to the 80-20 baseball community, to all of you. Here are some of the questions that I will ask in the interview, just in case you're wondering, like, hey, where are you going with that, Coach Bo? Strength and conditioning? Do we really need to do that? I coach an 8U team, a 10U team. Should they even be focusing on strength and conditioning? Now, I say strength and conditioning because that's the terminology most everybody recognizes or uses still to this day. I'm sure 15, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, that may very likely change the wording on that. So I try to put good thought into coming up with questions that will be specifically geared to youth baseball, such as the first question I'll ask once we get to know our guest, coach. With regard to strength and conditioning at the youth baseball level, what are 2 key things that you think are misunderstood by most youth coaches and youth parents? The next question I'll ask is, what are 2 to 3 strength and conditioning actions that youth baseball players should be doing the most or the most often? Another question I'll ask is there something you're currently doing with your athletes that you believe is an updated or improved version of what the majority of other baseball strength and conditioning fitness coaches are doing? And lastly, I will have or ask the coach to share out the key things that they'd like to add to the conversation that they feel youth baseball coaches, youth baseball parents should hear and should know as they move forward and as their kid moves forward with their baseball journey. So that interview will be coming to you in a few weeks. In today's episode, 2 pregame tips. So I'm going to share out 2 pregame tips with all of you. I have a pitching quote of the week, and this one is from a Hall of Fame pitcher that probably everybody listening knows who this Hall of Fame pitcher is. And it's a pitcher that all pitchers can emulate their game off of regardless of their skill set or talent level. To me, that's a big deal. And we will talk about, of course, habit number 6 in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Coaches series. If you haven't already, listen to habit number 5 from last week. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. I felt really good about how last week's episode turned out. In fact, I published it while I was out in Arizona at spring training. And I wanted to talk about spring training and how we can learn a little bit from it. I'm also going to share my 2 cents about one well talked about thing, and that is the pitch clock. I went to a game. We went to a couple days of early morning practice sessions, backfield, some cool stuff going on, some batting practice for the major leaguers. Saw quite an assortment of things going on, but we did make it out to one game. And that pitch clock, I like it. There was no problem with the flow of the game. There were no balls or strikes added because somebody didn't get ready in time or pitch in time or was in the box too slow. You wouldn't even have known there was a pitch clock if you didn't know to look for it. And it didn't change the vibe of the game, but the game had 10 runs. It went a full 9 innings, including the bottom half of the ninth, and it was done in 2 hours and 35 minutes. The next day, my nephew and brother-in-law went to another game. Big shout out to David, Coach Pyrus, and my nephew Cyrus. They went to the game the next day, and it was done in 2 hours and 25 minutes. So these games are not just going by so quick that, whoa, I don't even feel like I got my money's worth, or man, that just seemed like a race to the end. You couldn't really tell the difference. I really like it. I'm an old school baseball person. I grew up watching TWIB This Week in Baseball. I grew up going to games, like I've mentioned many times, in the 80s, the 90s. I love old school baseball. Study the old players often, read old baseball books. I'm a big fan of old school baseball, and I love the pitch clock. I love it. In fact, about 20 years ago, I pitched in the Summer Baseball World Series, the NBC World Series, National Baseball Congress World Series. Pitched in it in 2 different years. When I was playing up there in Alaska, if you win the league or finish second, you would go to Wichita for a couple weeks. A lot of you have probably heard of this, but if not, there's this Summer Ball World Series for college players, and they were running that with a pitch clock 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, and there was no problems with it. There was never an issue. You didn't feel rushed. It was the same setup as they have now in terms of how much time between pitches. Never noticed a difference. Really didn't. There was one time I was pitching where the hitter didn't get in time and they called a ball, but that was it. There really wasn't any difference, but the games were getting done faster because there was no lollygagging. There was no rubbing the baseball up 20 times between pitches. There was no fixing your batting gloves, Nomar, 6 times between each pitch. It's one thing to have a routine, but why does that routine have to be 17 seconds long? There's no reason to have a routine that's that long if you're a hitter or a pitcher. Just speed up your routine, and it'll all work out great. And again, old school baseball fans, I hear a lot of gripe about the new pitch clock. And if you go look at old school baseball games when baseball was America's pastime, those games were all done in 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2 hours and 15 minutes. Those were the average times. So even with the pitch clock now, they're still not even close to those old school baseball times. Of course, commercials and TV and things like that play into it. But my point is, going out to a ball game in the 30s, the 40s, 50s, even into the 60s and 70s was a 2 hour 15, at the most 2 hour and 45 minute deal. The last couple of years, the average baseball game has been over 3 hours, many going 3.5 plus hours. And as you know, I'm a huge fan of the 80-20, prioritizing and valuing our time. Our time is precious and finite. Speaking of which, let's keep this show moving forward. So I dug the pitch clock. There's a thing I wanted to share with any of you that go to spring training in Florida or Arizona. I know some listeners emailed me and said they were going to be out in Arizona. We didn't cross paths. They were there a little earlier than I was. I went to that last weekend. And there's something I want to share. Anybody who ever goes out to spring training, I recommend y'all go out. It's a fun time. I mean, definitely if you're in the northern, colder states, why not? Why not? Go warm up. It was 72 degrees. We went swimming in the pool, went to baseball games. The kids swam probably 10 or 12 hours, and we were at the baseball field for 10 or 12 hours. My nephew and brother-in-law were there even longer than that. So it was just awesome all around. Swimming and baseball, I highly recommend it. But if you are going out there to learn how to be a better coach, or if you're trying to pick up coaching tips, or if players are trying to study the training tips of players, it's really not a good example for youth baseball training for these reasons. One, those players that we see in spring training, all those professional players, have already been training fairly hard for months on their own. They've all been training for months, typically at least 2 months, if not longer. Now, if you get there towards the end of spring training, it's even more. But even at the beginning of spring training, typically those players have all been training for at least 2 to 3 months. And some of that training has been pretty intense. They're not coming into spring training and warming up. They're ready to rock for the most part, outside of those established players who have contracts, who have deals. But even those players are still training pretty hard for the most part before they even show up to spring training. Another thing, they are pacing themselves much more than youth players should or have to. They're older, of course, so wear and tear on the body is a little more important. 9-year-olds wear and tear shouldn't be an issue. And they play about 180 to 200 games a year if you factor in spring training, the regular season, and the average players' postseason games. About 180, 190 games, maybe 200 games in a year. So that's important to keep in mind. They have a lot ahead of them. They travel all the time, sleeping in hotels and airplanes. They have to pace themselves more. So they've already been training hard before they got there. They play a lot more games than youth players. They have a lot longer season. They're also working on somewhat different things that are the last 1% to 5% of things because they've already spent 20 years on the fundamentals and already perfected the 80-20 for the most part, just needing some fine tuning from time to time. That's why they're in the major leagues, or that's why they're at that level. Most of them have all but perfected the 20% that brings 80% of the results. And now they're spending that extra time trying to perfect the 80% of the little details that drive the last 20%, last 10%. Also, a lot of the non-game stuff that you see at spring training is window dressing. Yes, I said it. It's window dressing in a way. There's so much proprietary knowledge with training, technology, coaching, strategy, more than ever. And that stuff's kept under wraps for the most part. In fact, the batting cages like at the Padres facility, all the major leaguers are in batting cages that you can't see in, and they're in there working out, doing things. You can't get over towards the bullpen mounds that easily. You can see them, but you just can't get over. You can't really hear anything they're saying from where they have the fans sectioned off. So the things that we see when we go to spring training, a lot of it's window dressing, especially the major league level. The minor league level, you'll see more, especially if you stick around for some of those backfield games. So I just want to share that. I highly recommend going out. It's a great experience, a lot of fun. My nephew got a ball tossed to him from one of the players, the minor league player. We didn't really recognize him at first. We went and looked him up. He's Kobe Robinson. Kobe Robinson went out of his way. He's a pitcher in the Padres organization. I guess he topped out at 99 miles per hour pitching. He's got some pretty good stuff, pretty good slider. So that was really cool. Shout out to Kobe Robinson. Not that he's listening, but if you know him, give him a shout out. Tell him he made my nephew's day by throwing him a baseball and then autographing it after. Just little things like that. A little disappointed in Juan Soto. So many kids were yelling his name. Juan Soto, you're my favorite player. Juan Soto, I've been following you since you got into the league. Juan Soto, I follow you on Instagram. Juan Soto, you're the best. Never even looked at him. He was out there for a good part of 20, 25 minutes. Had plenty of time standing around. Never even made eye contact. Never a thumbs up. Never a wave. I'll blame the Padres for that. Padres should have a recommendation to players. Give them some tips and tricks on how to, hey, it's like the 80-20 rule for dealing with fans. Do you need to go autograph all those baseballs? No, you don't have the time to do that. There was a game starting up. You don't have time. There's hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000 fans there. You don't have time to go sign all those baseballs. But you don't think giving a wave, a thumbs up, hey guys, how you doing? Good to see you here. Love you all. Whatever. It's just something. How long would that take? I bet if you just said something or a thumbs up or a high five or even just a wave, just say something kind, 10 seconds, 5 seconds. I think 80% of those fans and 80% of their need or wants would have been fulfilled. They would have felt content. They would have felt happy. Now, I will say this, Fernando Tatis Jr. had a crew. He had a fan club. They had this really cool stereo, handheld, pretty powerful stereo, and it was decked out in Padre stuff, had Tony Gwynn's name on it, had some autographs, really cool custom-made speaker. Well, anyways, the fan club was playing the music nice and loud. Of course, they're playing that Latin, Caribbean, Dominican, Puerto Rican, great music. They were playing it loud, and Fernando Tatis Jr., when he was done with his hitting and he was off to the side, he started doing a little dance to the music. Nothing elaborate, but just enough. And I looked over at his fan club, a couple families together, and they were happy. They were fired up that he was just dancing, albeit subtly, to their music. It was a little thing. So you kids that are listening, when you get famous, remember, it doesn't have to be no autographs, no recognition, no saying hi, and it doesn't have to be autographs until 1 a.m. Doesn't mean you got to sign every ball. You can meet in the middle. Sometimes it's just a wave, just a quick message. Hey, how you guys doing? Thanks for being here. Love you all. You guys rock. Maybe a quick shout out to a fan or two, specific to their shirt or jersey or hat or something. And then that's that. And you're going to make a lot of kids happy. So I did see some good things, saw some things I didn't like. I could talk about a lot of other things, but I want to dive in to habit number 6 of our 7 Habits of Highly Effective Coaching series, Synergize. Synergy. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. The whole team is greater than each player added together. The sum, it's like exponential power. Synergy is better than my way or your way. It's our way. A quote by Dr. Stephen Covey. Of course, that's the author of the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. For those of you that are just jumping on here, we are taking those 7 habits from the well-known famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey, and we're taking those habits and tying them in to being better coaches because they absolutely apply to coaching and being the best youth baseball coach, the best baseball coach we can be for our teams, for our players. Synergy, being on the same page. Synergy is the greatest on teams with the best team cultures. On the flip side, there is almost no synergy on teams full of selfish, I-first players. Not team-first players, but I-first, me-first players. Same with that me-first family, and same with coaches. If you have coaches that are just about their kid, synergy will be much lower and much less. So synergy is greatest on teams with the best team cultures. Being on the same page is a huge part of it. It's about our way, not my way or your way, our way. Now, high trust leads to a high level of synergy. Communication that is transparent and genuinely open, clear, concise. I think the key is genuine and transparent, clear, open communication and building trust amongst everybody on the team, everybody involved with the team. That leads to high levels of synergy. Open-mindedness drives synergy. Cultivate an open-minded attitude with your players. The more open-minded everyone is, the better the flow. The more open-minded, the better the flow. The better the flow, the more synergy, the more production, the more positive production. Not just working with players, but coaches, if you're a manager or an assistant, working with the other coaches, working with them, open-minded, listening to them, working together, synergy. An assistant coach may have an initial idea, and then another coach will add to that. Kind of like the BASF commercials that used to be on. They don't make the products you buy, they make the products you buy better. The other assistant coaches may not come up with the idea. They'll just make them better, and then they'll add to it, and they'll hone it, they'll fine tune it. That's a big one. I think setting up a group message or an email thread is a great way to go about it. A group text message or an email thread, something simple with the assistant coaches. Also, increase the synergy of your team by getting input from parents. Like you do with the players, or as I've recommended you do with the players, give a questionnaire out to the parents. A questionnaire that allows them to feel heard, builds transparency, and at the end of the day, it produces a team, a group, an environment where everybody is much more likely to be on the same page. Synergy. Another strategy, do some fun non-baseball outings, activities that involve teamwork. Now, just doing non-baseball activities like going to the pizza parlor, going to this, doing that, that's a little easier to plan. If you can plan a non-baseball outing or activity that involves teamwork, and is different than baseball, has nothing to do with baseball, or maybe even anything to do with sports. So they see their teammates, they see the coaches not in their uniforms or their gear or their baseball setting. They see everyone in a different light. I'll tell you a quick story about this. Years ago, I was coming out of the movie theater. I was on a date. I was coming out of the movie theater, and 3 of my students were walking into the movie theater. And I'll never forget what the kid Eric said, the more outgoing of the students said, "Yo, Mr. A." You know, my last name's Asherbrander, so I just say, call me Mr. A, because that's that 10 letters, 4 syllables. He's like, "Yo, Mr. A, you go to the movie theaters?" And I was laughing pretty hard at that. It was hard for him and the group to visualize me not teaching a class or at a school. And I think it helps that connectedness and puts everybody on the same page a little more. And so using fun non-baseball outings, activities, and if they can involve all teamwork, that's a bonus. Like building something, preparing a meal as a team for, say, the parents or a group of people, do an escape room. There's a lot of different things where you can do stuff together, a bonding and building experience. Get creative with this, but there's a lot you can do as a team where it's not a competition, but it's working together in a non-baseball outing. Because some of your players may not know the other kids on the team from school. They might not go to the same school. In fact, they probably go to different schools. Some of the kids, the majority of them may go to the same school. Very likely you have 2 or 3 different schools represented on your team. It connects them with more of the person rather than the player. I know it's a little thing, but I do think doing fun non-baseball outings or activities as a team, I recommend doing one early on in the year, middle of the year. And then if you can do one right before the playoffs, that's always great, or at least at the end of the year when it's all done. And if you can do something where they're working together, you can do the pizza and the ice cream and stuff. But if you're doing something together, there's a lot of different things you can do. I really recommend that to build and expedite the synergy amongst the team. Moving forward, have players share out something about themselves that the other players may not know. The connectedness, synergy, on the same page. They're on the same page. Part of that starts with knowing that they can relate and connect with the other players, that they're all very similar. Promote compliments and eliminate rudeness or teasing that is coming from a bad place. So definitely eliminate rudeness, promote compliments, and eliminate teasing if it's not coming from a solid place or if it becomes a little excessive. Now, here's a couple of tips when it comes to strategies, synergy within strategies, coaching strategy, synergy. Make the lineup to sync up a little bit better. Create a lineup that syncs up a little better. Now, with the youth levels, the lower down, just make sure each kid throughout the year gets fairly even amount of at-bats. Ideally, they all get the same amount of at-bats. As they get a little older, 12, 11 or 12, you can maybe start messing with the lineup a little bit, but they should still get a balanced amount of at-bats, in my opinion. It's not high school, it's not college, it's not pro ball. At those levels, yeah, definitely you're going to get the lineup going based off of productivity and things like that. But take the lineup and sync it better. You may not want to have a power hitter in front of a high on base hitter. You could flip that. So you'd have somebody who's maybe not quite as good a hitter but gets on base a lot, hitting in front of a hitter that's maybe a little slower but got some more power, or somebody who really hits a lot of doubles. You want somebody on base for them. You may also want to have a high on base hitter in the 9 hole rather than the 7-8 hole if you do put some of your better hitters towards the front, so then when the lineup flips over, there's a higher percentage that somebody will be on base to drive in. Now, I do think at the lower levels, 7, 6, 8, 9, 10U, you should just rotate the order through. It's about equal distribution of at-bats. You're about player development. It's about player development. Now, if kids are not hustling or they don't show up to practice outside of a medical emergency or serious family issue, if there's reasons they don't deserve to be at the top of the lineup or hit as much, that's fine. I think that's important that we make sure we don't go all one way or the other. Another great way to boost synergy are doing drills that involve a lot of moving parts. And now the challenge there is setting them up quick and not wasting a bunch of time. But having drills that are based on going against a clock or a stopwatch where there's more than 3 or 4 or 5 players working together towards that goal, that can create some synergy because they're playing off each other. They're watching to see how they can be in the right position, ready, faster, especially on defense. I think about synergy in basketball and hockey and in football too, but basketball and hockey, it's just a synergy on those courts and on the ice. It's pretty fascinating. The synergy in hockey, it's really cool to watch. In basketball, you'll hear players say, I knew where he was going before he went, or I knew he was going to do that before he did that. We were on the same page. I anticipated he was going to do that. That kind of synergy. Not as likely to see that in baseball just because of the design of the game, but definitely being synced up. Synergy can definitely help. And one last tip, talking to your catchers about knowing the pitchers, where they like the setup. If they're a little high with their pitches, maybe adjusting the target lower. If they have multiple pitches, trying to be in sync with them, trying to have some synergy with how they're calling the pitches and locations, trying to find some synergy between the battery mates, the pitcher and the catcher. That's a big one. Also, synergy with relays and cutoffs and things like that. So you definitely want to have some synergy on a strategic level and the flow of plays and action. But it's much more than that. As always, full transparency for all of you great 80-20 baseball coaches, parents, players. This one was probably the hardest, the one I was looking forward to the least in terms of trying to tie it into coaching. I think it came together pretty well. Again, I think this is more of a paradigm shaper, and the paradigm is the operating system. So you have your computer, it has operating system. You have your phone, it has an operating system. Then you have these apps, right? You have apps, you have software that you add to it. We're focused mostly on the operating system because that's the big game changer. So if you have the right operating system, you can do anything off of that. But if your operating system sucks, you really can't do anything off of that very easily. So I think this one, synergy, habit number 6, falls more into the category of operating system updates, improvements. And next week, we're going to get into habit number 7, sharpen the saw. I'm fired up about that one. I have some good stuff to share out with all of you about habit number 7, sharpen the saw, and also top 5 coaching tweets of the month, top 5 coaching tweets of the month. I'll tell you what, these coaching tweets are gold. So I curate the coaching tweets throughout the baseball community over the course of the month, and then I bring it to you. We dive in, we drill down a little bit into each and how we can take that message and use it to be better coaches. So the top 5 coaching tweets of the month coming next week. But before we wrap up this episode, I got 2 really great things to share. Coaching Quote of the Week by Greg Maddux. I recommend sharing this quote. This is the final pitching quote of the week in our 3-part coaching quote of the week series that involves pitching. I recommend you share this with your pitchers. Quote, "The reason I think I'm a good pitcher is I locate my fastball and I change speeds, period. That's what I do to pitch. That's what pitchers have to do to win games." If that's not the 80-20 rule right there. This is Greg Maddux, Hall of Fame pitcher, one of the best of all time, and somebody that we can all relate to, and most kids can relate to regardless of skill set and talent. Greg Maddux went out there with stuff that you might see at a varsity high school game in terms of velocity and physicality, and he dominated major league hitters for a long, long time. He said, quote, "The reason I think I'm a good pitcher is because I locate my fastball and I change speeds, period. That's what you do to pitch. That's what pitchers have to do to win games," end quote. Love that. Share that with your pitchers, especially those that want to overthrow and hump up and just throw really hard. And as promised, I have 2 pregame tips for all of you. We're going to hit these quick. Pregame tips. Getting ready for the game is important. Preparing our players in practice is more important, but having a nice pregame routine is super important. These are 2 paradigm operating system level tips. Make sure your team is fully warmed up, but no warmer. Make sure your team is fully warmed, but no warmer. And tip number 2, in your pregame routine, put quality well before quantity. That doesn't mean you need to go slow. You can be efficient with your preparation, your drill, your environment that you set up before the game, your pregame environment routine. It can be efficient, but put quality well before quantity. In practice, you're blending the 2 together, quality and quantity, because you want to see a lot of variety in practice. Players should see a lot of game-like reps, but before the game, you want them warmed, but no warmer, and you want to put quality well before quantity in the pregame routine. That's definitely different than practice. You could use the same drills. You could use some of the same throwing routines, same warm-ups and stuff that you do in practice for your pregame routine, but you need to be sure to differentiate the 2 in these 2 ways. Be fully warmed. Have your team fully warmed, but no warmer. Have them fully prepared, but not extra, and emphasize quality reps before a high quantity of reps before a game. All right. We'll see you next week. Until then, go over, get that drill design guide, that free 21-page PDF drill design guide, 8020baseball.com, 8020baseball.com. You can follow me on Twitter, 8020_baseball. Best way to support the pod, the easiest way to support the podcast, if you're getting something out of this, if you wouldn't mind taking a minute, 1 minute, at the most 2 minutes, and just give the podcast a genuine rating or just a quick review, and email me your success stories. Email me your questions. I'd love to be along for your coaching journey. All of you great 80/20 baseball coaches, families, players. So reach out. Coach Bo at 8020baseball.com, Coach Bo 8020baseball.com, or you can just send it through the contact page at 8020baseball.com. Got a lot of articles and videos over there, about a dozen of each on the website. Check it out. And until next week, take care of yourselves, your health, your families, your close friends, and take care of your team, your players by taking this information out there, prepared, ready to use, and then use it. Put it into action. Take it to the field. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.